The silence in Bernard Kingsley's penthouse wasn't peaceful. It was oppressive. The kind that wrapped around a man's chest and whispered cruel reminders of everything he'd lost. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the skyline, the city humming below with a life he no longer felt part of. It had been 6 months since the accident. 6 long months since metal twisted around him like a coffin and left him with fractured bones, a spinal injury and a prognosis that boiled down to 2 words: maybe walking. His doctors were honest, 50-50. He had a 50% chance of walking again, but it felt like 0% to him. Bernard was only 35, a billionaire who once ruled his business empire with calculated precision and unmatched confidence. He wasn't just wealthy, he was feared, respected, envied. But now he couldn't even get to the bathroom without assistance. He hated needing anyone, hated what the mirror showed him: sunken eyes, growing beard, legs that had betrayed him. 4 caregivers had come and gone in just 2 months. Each lasted barely a week. He scared them off with sharp words, impossible standards, and the emotional wall he kept higher than any skyscraper in the city. "Sir?" came a voice, interrupting his spiraling thoughts. It was Alex, his long-time assistant, loyal, efficient, always respectful, even when Bernard was at his worst. "What is it now?" Bernard muttered without turning his head. "I found another caregiver. She's experienced and highly recommended. Her name's Michelle Thompson. She'll be here at 10. Bernard scoffed. "And how long will this one last?" 3 days, too?" Alex didn't respond. He knew better. He simply left the room, the soft click of the door the only answer Bernard would get. At 10:01 a.m. sharp, the elevator doors opened. Michelle stepped into Bernard's home with confidence, but not arrogance. She was 28, with smooth brown skin, almond-shaped eyes filled with intelligence, and curls pulled back into a soft bun. She wore scrubs, but her posture made her look like she belonged in a boardroom, calm, composed, unapologetically present. Bernard looked her over from his wheelchair. His icy blue eyes narrowed. "You're younger than I expected," he said flatly. Michelle met his stare without flinching. "And you're grumpier than I expected." A long silence. Then for a second, just a second, something flickered in Bernard's expression. Amusement, shock. It vanished quickly, replaced by his usual frost. "If you're going to last here, Miss Thompson, understand this. I don't want pity. I don't need small talk. You're here to follow instructions. Nothing more." Michelle nodded. Unfazed. "Understood. You'll find I'm good at following instructions. But I'm even better at helping people who don't know how to ask for help." That caught him off guard. She walked over and began reviewing the layout of his medication. Everything was labeled, impeccably organized. Still, she double-checked every dosage. She didn't rush. She didn't make nervous chatter. She simply did her job. The day passed without drama. Bernard kept expecting her to break. Most did by lunchtime. But Michelle served his lunch, monitored his therapy schedule, and even got him to do 2 more leg lifts than usual without using force or begging. She used patience like a tool. By dinner, he was irritated by how not irritated she seemed. "Oh, you don't talk much," he said, watching her from across the table as she prepared his evening meds. "You said you didn't want small talk." His lips curved, barely. "Most people ignore what I say." She poured water into a glass. "I'm not most people." That night, Bernard lay in bed staring at the ceiling. He didn't know what it was, but Michelle's presence left a strange echo in the room. He didn't feel comforted, not exactly, but something in him had stirred. Something that had been buried since the accident. Not hope, no, not yet, but curiosity. The next few days tested Michelle in all the ways she expected, and in a few she didn't. Bernard was a perfectionist. He wanted everything timed, placed, and performed a certain way. He pointed out when she was 30 seconds late with his pills. He criticized how she folded towels. Once he even made her redo his protein shake because it wasn't cold enough. Michelle didn't flinch. She adjusted. She stayed polite but never submissive. She treated him like a man, not a patient. And slowly, Bernard's scathing comments began to lose their sting. Sometimes he even asked questions, not personal ones, but they revealed something about him. One morning, as she was adjusting the resistance on his physical therapy machine, he asked why caregiving. Michelle looked up. My mother had MS. I took care of her through my teen years. I was good at it. And after she passed, I just kept going. He didn't respond. But later, when she returned to the kitchen, she found that the protein shake was already blended, the exact temperature she preferred to serve it at. A week passed, then two. Michelle became part of the house rhythm. She played jazz during exercises. She insisted he try new stretches. When he got sarcastic, she met it with dry humor that sometimes made him smile, even if he tried to hide it. There was an ease in the room now, not warmth, not yet, but no longer ice. One evening, after an especially difficult session, Bernard winced in pain as she helped him onto the couch. "I'm not a charity case," he muttered. "I never said you were." "Then stop looking at me like I'm some broken thing." Michelle sighed and sat beside him. "You're not broken, Bernard, but you are wounded, and there's nothing weak about needing help to heal." He looked at her then, really looked. Her skin glowed softly in the lamplight. Her eyes weren't full of pity. They were strong, steady. "You make it hard to hate you," he said, almost like a confession. "Good. Hate's a heavy thing to carry." They sat in silence. A different kind of silence. And for the first time in months, Bernard didn't want to be alone. The next morning was different. Bernard was irritable, snappier than usual. When Michelle asked about his mood, he snapped, "It's none of your business." Then later, he accused her of overstepping when she adjusted his pillow without being asked. Michelle stood tall. "If this is going to work, you don't get to lash out every time you feel scared." That made him furious. He wheeled away from her, his knuckles white with pressure. "You think you know me? You don't know a damn thing about what it's like to go from being everything to being this." Michelle softened. "You're still everything, Bernard, but you're going to have to stop punishing people for not leaving you." He stared at her, jaw clenched. "I think you should go," he said coldly. She blinked. Hurt flashed across her face, but she nodded. "If that's what you want." She gathered her things quietly and left. As the door clicked shut behind her, the silence returned. But this time it wasn't just heavy. It was unbearable. Bernard had never been good at regret. It was a feeling that felt too messy, too vulnerable, too human. But for the past 48 hours, it clung to him like a second skin. Michelle was gone. Her presence, once mildly annoying and tolerable at best, had become so constant that her absence felt like a vacuum. The apartment had never been loud, but now every tick of the clock echoed louder. The soft jazz she used to play during therapy was replaced by sterile silence. Even the smell of lavender, something subtle she'd always carried, was gone from the air. He hated himself for how it ended, but more than that, he hated that he missed her. She had been right. Her words cut deeper than he let on. He was scared, not just of never walking again, but of what this new version of his life meant, of being seen in weakness. And Michelle had seen him. Not the polished billionaire in the magazines, but the man behind the scars, the tremors, the anger, and she hadn't looked away. Until he pushed her out. Bernard sighed and looked out the window. Rain trickled down the glass like slow tears. His fingers drummed against the armrest of his wheelchair, restless, conflicted. His pride begged him to let it go, to move on and find another caregiver, someone who would follow his instructions without making him feel exposed. But he didn't want another caregiver. He wanted Michelle. On the third day, Bernard rang for Alex. "I need you to call her," he said without preamble. Alex arched a brow. "Michelle?" Bernard nodded, jaw clenched. "Yes, I want her back." Alex hesitated. "Should I tell her why?" Bernard looked down at his hands. His voice came out lower than usual. "Just ask if she'll come." Alex nodded and stepped out. Michelle stared at her phone when the call came. She was sitting on her tiny balcony, wrapped in a hoodie and sipping tea that had long gone cold. She hadn't cried when she left Bernard's apartment. Not until she got home. But now, days later, the tears were gone, replaced by frustration. At herself, at him, but mostly at how much she missed him. Still, when Alex called and asked if she would consider returning, she hesitated. "He didn't say anything?" she asked quietly. "Only that he wants you back." Michelle was silent for a moment. Then she exhaled. "I'll come tomorrow. One condition, he doesn't get to fire me every time he panics." Alex chuckled softly. I think he's already regretting it. Good. The elevator dinged open at 9 a.m. sharp. Bernard turned as he heard the wheels of her suitcase glide across the marble floor. When their eyes met, there was a charged stillness between them. She looked the same, calm, capable, but he noticed something new now. Her strength wasn't just in her posture or the way she walked. It was in her ability to come back after he hurt her. I'm back, she said simply. He nodded. I'm glad. She set her bag down. Before anything else, this works only if there's trust. I'm not here to be your punching bag, Bernard. I care, but I have boundaries. He swallowed, guilt swirling in his chest. I know. And I'm sorry. I shouldn't have pushed you away. Silence. Then Michelle smiled gently. Good, now get ready. Your therapist's coming in an hour and you've been slacking. Bernard blinked, and for the first time in days, a flicker of warmth sparked in his chest. She wasn't gone. And maybe, just maybe, he wasn't lost. In the weeks that followed, something began to shift between them. Their mornings developed rhythm. Michelle made breakfast just the way he liked, protein-heavy, low sugar, but added her own touches, cinnamon in his coffee, fresh fruit with sarcastic notes that said things like, "Eat me, you grump." She teased him, challenged him. And Bernard started looking forward to it. Physical therapy grew more intense. Bernard started pushing harder, his muscles slowly responding. There were setbacks, moments of frustration, but Michelle never let him stay down for long. One afternoon, after a particularly tough session, Bernard leaned back on the couch, sweat glistening on his forehead. Michelle handed him water and sat beside him. You did good today, she said softly. He looked at her, really looked. The way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, the curve of her lips, the strength in her voice. Something stirred in him, not physical but emotional. He wanted her here, not just as a caregiver, but as something more. I've been thinking, he said. She glanced at him. Dangerous habit, he chuckled seriously, about who I used to be. She leaned in slightly. And who's that? Untouchable, confident, cold. She tilted her head. Sounds like someone I met. Bernard smiled, then shook his head. Before the accident, I had everything, but I wasn't happy. I didn't even know what peace felt like. Then this happened and I lost control. My body, my independence. And then you walked in like nothing scared you, like you could see through all the mess. I didn't see through you, she said gently. I saw you. He exhaled, slow and heavy. And that scared the hell out of me. Michelle looked at him, her eyes soft. That's what healing looks like sometimes. Scary, messy, uncomfortable. Bernard turned to her, his voice barely above a whisper. You scare me. Michelle's smile widened. Good, means I'm doing my job. For a few seconds, the space between them grew electric. Their eyes locked. Their breath slowed. Bernard leaned in slightly, his hand brushing hers. But just as quickly, the moment passed. Michelle stood and cleared her throat. You should rest. He nodded, pulse racing. Neither of them said anything more, but the air was heavy with everything unspoken. Later that night, Bernard stared at the ceiling again. But this time it wasn't regret that kept him awake. It was longing, for her laughter echoing down the hall, for the way she saw him as more than his wheelchair, for the hope she planted quietly in the cracks of his soul. And for the first time since the accident, Bernard wondered, could he be falling in love? Bernard didn't sleep much that night. The shadows on his ceiling seemed to dance with every conflicted thought running through his mind. He was terrified, not of pain or even his physical limitations, but of what he was beginning to feel. For Michelle, love wasn't supposed to happen like this. Not to him, not in the ruins of who he used to be. And yet her presence stirred something in him so real, so grounding it left him breathless. He rolled to the window, looking out at the city skyline. All that power, all that wealth, it used to make him feel invincible. But none of it had ever brought him what Michelle gave him in silent moments. Peace. By morning he was exhausted, grumpy and unusually quiet during breakfast. Michelle noticed. You didn't sleep again, did you? She asked, sliding his plate of eggs and toast in front of him. He shook his head, eyes fixed on the food but not really seeing it. Wasn't hungry either. Michelle pulled out the chair across from him and sat, arms crossed. Talk to me. Bernard blinked. She never pressed him before. It was usually quiet observation, subtle encouragement. But today, she looked at him like she wasn't giving him a choice. And maybe he didn't want one. "I don't know who I am anymore," he admitted, voice low. "Before the accident I was someone in control, someone powerful. Now, I feel like I'm watching my life from the outside, unable to move, unable to change anything." Michelle was quiet for a moment. Then she reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. "You're still someone," she said gently. "Someone worth knowing, worth standing by." He swallowed hard, emotions clawing their way to the surface. "I didn't ask you to stand by." "No," she said. "But I chose to, and you don't get to make that choice for me." It was too much. Too real, too honest. Bernard pushed back from the table, frustration igniting like a match in dry grass. "You don't get it, Michelle. You show up here with your patience and your pep. Talks like this is all just a phase. I'll grow out of." Michelle stood too, her voice rising. "I never said that. But you keep pushing me away every time I care too much. Every time I see the man behind the fear, you run." He stared at her, chest heaving. "Because I don't know how to be him anymore." And then he said it. The words that shattered the moment. "Maybe you should leave." Michelle froze. Her face was unreadable except for her eyes. They glistened just a little. "I've left before," she said quietly. "But this time, Bernard, if I go, I won't come back." Silence. Tension hung in the air like a third presence, watching them. Then she turned, gathered her things, and walked out. The door shut with a finality that echoed through every inch of the penthouse. Hours passed. Then a day, then two. Bernard didn't call her. Pride wouldn't let him. Shame wouldn't let him. But every corner of the apartment reminded him of her. Her coffee mug still sat on the counter. The lavender-scented lotion she used to keep in the bathroom hadn't been thrown away. Her playlist still lingered on the stereo system, waiting for someone to hit play. Without her, the apartment felt like a shell. Worse than after the accident. It felt hollow. He tried to distract himself with business meetings and emails, but even that felt pointless now. She had become his rhythm, and now he was utterly lost. On the third day, Alex stepped into his office with a folder. But instead of handing it over, he just stared. Bernard looked up. "What?" "Just wondering how long you're going to pretend you didn't mess everything up." Bernard tensed. "That's not your concern." "With all due respect," Alex said, setting the folder down with a soft thud. "She made this place human again. And you? You've been miserable since she walked out. Everyone sees it." Bernard looked away. She was getting too close. "Exactly," Alex said. "Close is what you need." Bernard exhaled sharply. "What if I ruin her?" Alex's expression softened. "What if you don't?" That night, Bernard wheeled into the hallway where Michelle had stayed. Her door was slightly ajar. Her room was empty but untouched. She hadn't cleaned everything out. There was a book on the nightstand, a sweater on the back of a chair. She didn't want to leave. He closed his eyes, then turned back and picked up his phone. Michelle answered on the third ring. Silence lingered before either of them spoke. "It's me," he said. "I know," she replied quietly. "I was wrong," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "I was scared. I still am." Michelle didn't respond. Bernard swallowed hard. "But I don't want you to go. Not like this. I want to be better. Not just for myself, but for you, if you'll let me." Another beat of silence. "Then do you still have my favorite tea?" He blinked, surprised. "Yes, chamomile with honey." "Good," she said. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. When Michelle walked in, something in the air shifted. Bernard looked at her like she was sunlight after a storm. She moved toward him slowly, cautiously, but her eyes were soft, forgiving. He reached for her hand. "I don't know how to do this," he said. "Love, trust, any of it." "You don't have to know everything," Michelle whispered. "You just have to try." They stood like that for a long moment. No tension, no fear, just quiet, fragile hope. The next day, something changed in Bernard. He asked Michelle to extend his therapy by 30 minutes. "I need to get stronger," he said. She smiled. "What's the rush?" He glanced at her, then looked away, blushing slightly. "I want to take you out. On a real date. Not in here. Out there. Somewhere where people can see you with me." Michelle's heart fluttered. "Then you'll have to work harder." "I plan to," he said softly. "And not just at walking. By evening, they sat on the balcony together. Michelle tucked under a blanket, Bernard beside her in his chair. Stars twinkled above. He looked over at her. "You're my reason now." She looked up. For what? For fighting, for hoping, for trying. Michelle leaned her head on his shoulder. "Then let's walk toward that reason together." And in the silence of the night, with the city humming below, something beautiful unfolded between them. Not just healing, but love. It was no longer just about healing, therapy, and surviving. There was laughter now, inside jokes, music again. Bernard's voice lost its sharp edge. Michelle's touch lingered longer. They weren't just patient and caregiver anymore. They were something more. Something fragile but growing stronger by the day. And it began with a joke. Michelle was helping Bernard with his stretching when she smirked and said, "You know, you've never taken me on a proper date." Bernard raised a brow, breathless from the effort. "Is that a request or a complaint?" "A challenge," she replied with a wink. "I'd love to see you walk into a restaurant with me. Maybe even dance at our wedding." Bernard blinked. Her words were playful, but something in his chest stirred. A vision, so vivid and out of reach it almost hurt. Michelle in white. His arm around her, their feet moving to soft music. His voice cracked just a little. "You want me to walk at our wedding?" She paused, sobering. "I want you to walk because you want it. But yeah, I'd love to dance with you on our wedding day." He looked down at his legs. They felt like foreign objects most days, uncooperative, clumsy, weak. But when she said it like that, with that soft fire in her eyes, something ignited inside him. A purpose, a reason. The next morning, Bernard told his physical therapist to increase the session, duration by another 30 minutes. "Feeling ambitious today?" the therapist asked. Bernard's eyes found Michelle across the room. She was humming as she organized his supplements. "I have a reason now," he said quietly. Progress wasn't easy. There were days when the pain screamed louder than hope, when his legs trembled under his own weight and threatened to give out, days when he cursed the mirror and fought tears out of pride. But Michelle was always there. Again, she'd whisper, holding his elbow gently. He'd grit his teeth and rise. When he collapsed, she didn't rush to pity. She knelt beside him, wiped the sweat from his brow and said, "You're closer than yesterday." They celebrated tiny victories, 3 steps without a cane, standing without wobbling, balancing for a full 30 seconds. And then came the day he took 5 steps. Michelle cried. He tried to hide his own tears, but she caught them. "Don't," she said, cupping his face. "Every step is a love story now." Late one evening, Bernard sat at his piano. He hadn't played in nearly a year. His fingers hovered over the keys, unsure. The injury had taken a toll on more than just his legs. But Michelle sat beside him, resting her hand on his. "Play me something," she whispered. He took a breath, then pressed the first key. It was shaky, slow, but then he found rhythm. A simple tune. A lullaby he remembered his mother humming when he was a boy. Michelle closed her eyes, leaning her head against his shoulder. "That's beautiful," she said. "You make it beautiful," he replied softly. The first kiss happened the next night. It wasn't planned. They were sitting on the balcony again, wrapped in a blanket, her hand in his, as they listened to the sound of distant traffic and quiet wind. Bernard turned toward her. "You know I'm in love with you, right?" Michelle looked up, eyes wide. "You sure it's not gratitude talking?" He shook his head. "No. I've had people care for me before. None of them made me want to walk again just to take them dancing." Michelle smiled, her heart racing. "I've loved you since the day you made me redo that protein shake." He laughed, then sobered. "You deserve someone whole." "You are whole, Bernard. Just healing." And then, without hesitation, he leaned in. Their lips met. It wasn't rushed. It was soft, reverent, like a promise in motion. When they pulled apart, he whispered, "You're my miracle." Michelle pressed her forehead to his. "Then let's keep walking toward it." The weeks that followed were filled with joy and purpose. Bernard surprised Michelle with a gift, a small upright, piano placed in the guest room. "You told me once you never had one growing up," he said. "Now you do." Michelle stared at it, then at him, Bernard. He shrugged. "I had the money. But for the first time I had the reason." She didn't respond with words. She kissed him deeply, tears streaming down her cheeks. But even love has its tests. One afternoon, a new physical therapist's assistant joined the team, a young man named Julian. tall, handsome, and clearly smitten with Michelle. He laughed at all her jokes, offered to help carry her bag. Once Bernard caught him slipping her his number. The old Bernard would have stayed silent, bottled his jealousy, and then exploded in bitterness. But the man he was becoming, this version with hope and vulnerability, had a voice now. That evening, Bernard sat beside her as she read in the living room. He reached for her hand. "Do you find him attractive?" he asked plainly. Michelle looked up, surprised. "Julian." He nodded. She laughed softly. "Bernard, no. I'm not blind. He's cute, but he's not you. I can't dance. I can't even walk a block without help. You also can't stop making my heart beat faster every time you look at me." She said, "You see me in ways no one else ever has. You listen, you care, and you make me feel safe." He swallowed hard. Michelle moved closer. "You don't have to compete with anyone. You already won me." 1 month later, Bernard stood on his own, no assistance, for 10 full minutes. He took 7 slow steps toward her, then stopped. "Will you marry me?" he asked, breathless, eyes shining. Michelle blinked in shock. "What?" Bernard pulled out a velvet box from his pocket. He had been carrying it for days, waiting for the right moment. "I want to wake up with you for the rest of my life. I want to keep getting better with you. I want to take 1,000 steps, if it means walking into forever with you." Tears spilled from Michelle's eyes. "Yes," she whispered, 1,000 times, yes. And so the wedding preparations began. She chose a soft ivory dress. Simple, elegant, he chose determination. Every day leading up to the ceremony he practiced. Sometimes with tears, sometimes with laughter, always with Michelle by his side. His body ached, but his heart was whole. And he would walk for her. The morning sun filtered through the gauzy curtains of Bernard's bedroom, spilling golden light across the floor. Today wasn't just any day. It was the day he would marry Michelle. He sat quietly at the edge of the bed, staring at his reflection. The custom black tuxedo hung neatly on a nearby valet stand, his boutonniere of white tulips pinned to the lapel. Everything was in place, except for the tremor in his hands and the loud, unrelenting thump of his heart. Today he would walk, not with canes, not with the therapist behind him, alone. He had practiced for weeks, pushing through sweat and pain, falling and rising again with Michelle's voice in his head. "You don't have to be perfect. Just be present. Walk to me, Bernard. That's all I need." Now the moment had arrived. His assistant Alex entered quietly, holding his jacket. "Are you ready, sir?" Bernard exhaled. "As I'll ever be." Alex helped him into his clothes with quiet care. When they were done, Bernard gripped the handles of his walker, the last barrier he would soon leave behind. He looked at Alex and said, "Leave it in the car." Alex blinked. "Are you sure?" Bernard nodded. "I walked today. No excuses." Across the venue, Michelle stood in front of a mirror, her reflection making her breath catch. Her wedding dress was a dream, soft ivory lace that hugged her, curves in all the right places. Her natural curls were pinned back with pearl combs, and her makeup glowed with understated elegance. She had never felt more beautiful. Outside, the garden buzzed with quiet excitement. The floral arch was a sea of white roses, blush peonies, and soft green vines. Chairs were arranged under the blue sky, friends and family settling into their seats, unaware of the surprise awaiting them. No one knew if Bernard would walk, except Michelle. She believed. The music began. Soft piano notes swirled through the air. Michelle waited behind the wooden doors, her bouquet trembling slightly in her hand. Then the doors opened. Everyone rose, but instead of watching the bride, their heads turned to the other end of the aisle. Bernard stood at the entrance alone, straight, tall, focused, no walker, no cane, no help. A murmur rippled through the crowd as Bernard took his first step. Then another, and another. Each step was measured, deliberate, and trembling, but it was his. The pain was there. The effort showed in every line of his face. But he didn't stop. His eyes were locked on Michelle, and hers on him. Her hand flew to her mouth, tears spilling as she whispered, "He's walking. My God, he's really walking." Bernard reached the altar. Just as the music shifted, Michelle began her walk, meeting him halfway down the aisle. They stood in the center together, hand in hand. As the officiant cleared his throat, struggling to keep his own composure, Bernard leaned closer and whispered, "I did it." Michelle smiled through her tears. "I knew you would." The ceremony was simple, intimate, and deeply emotional. Bernard spoke first. "I didn't believe in love the way people spoke about it. I believed in power, in control, in building walls so high no one could touch me. And then I fell. And when everything else left, my mobility, my pride, my strength, there was you, not just a caregiver, a force, a fire. The first person who saw me when I couldn't even look at myself. Michelle, you are the reason I walk, the reason I live. I vow to spend every day learning how to love you better, with every step I take." By then, half the crowd was already in tears. Michelle's voice shook as she replied, "I've seen broken before. I've seen pain. But when I saw you, I didn't see broken. I saw a man carrying weight no one else could understand. And I saw fight in your eyes even when you tried to hide it. You didn't need to walk to prove anything to me. You already walked into my heart the day you made me feel seen and safe. I vow to always be your peace, your partner, and the woman who'll cheer for every step, even when you think no one is watching." The kiss was soft, sacred, slow. The crowd erupted in applause, standing not just for love but for triumph. The reception was filled with joy. A string quartet played jazz covers. Candles flickered in tall glass holders. The dinner was Bernard's favorite: grilled steak and herb-roasted vegetables, paired with wine and laughter. But the moment everyone waited for came after dessert. The first dance. Michelle stood in the middle of the dance floor, hands outstretched. Bernard joined her, walking slowly, hands steady. The music began, at last, by Etta James. He held her close. They swayed. No fancy moves, just slow steps. Eyes locked, hearts beating as one. Michelle rested her head on his chest. "You made it." Bernard pressed a kiss to her forehead. "No, we made it." Later that night, back at their home now, Michelle helped him out of his jacket. He sat on the bed, smiling up at her like he had never seen anything more perfect. "You know," he said, pulling her close, "this is just the beginning." She ran her fingers through his hair. "Of what?" "Of every day I get to prove how much I love you." Michelle cupped his face. "You already did the impossible, Bernard. You walked for me." He shook his head. "No," he whispered, kissing her palm. "I walked to you." Months passed, then a year. The walls of Bernard's heart, once built to keep everyone out, were now windows, open, sunlit, and filled with laughter. Their home was alive with love, music, and whispered "I love you." Sometimes he still struggled. Some days were harder than others. But Michelle never let him give up. And Bernard never stopped walking toward joy, toward healing, and always, always toward her. Because in every step he took now, there lived a reason, a purpose, a love that changed everything, forever. To my incredible viewers, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you for every view, every like, every comment, and every moment you've spent with my stories. Your love and support breathe life into every character, every emotion, and every chapter I share. You are the reason these tales of love, resilience, and hope continue to blossom. Whether you've been here since the beginning or just joined the journey, know that you are deeply appreciated. Your encouragement means the world to me, and I'm beyond grateful to have you as part of this growing family. Here's to many more stories, tears, smiles, and unforgettable moments. I see you, I thank you, and I carry your support into every word I write. With love always, Vintage Mike Tales.